You know, that couldn't be more American, selling your bourbon that way, using those shots. I mean, we thought it looked nice for a small craft distillery, but we were also keen to give them an alternate version that brought some storytelling and some of the actual, because we knew the brand, or we developed a relationship with the brand for a while, and we wanted to get a little bit more out of it, and that's what this next example shows. And it uses almost the same shots. It's a little bit longer, but you'll see the difference hopefully, but also see some of the same shots used.
Okay.
I was always the kid that took apart things. I was always the kid who had to figure out how things worked. Producing a whiskey really attracted me. It's applied science, almost at its best. You run through biology in the fermentation. You're running through physics when you run a still. It's being able to tinker with things and build things and figure out how things work. There's a certain feel that a good whiskey has. There's a subtlety, there's a silkiness. It's a little seductive. I think the 14-year-old version of me, if he were to see me now, would be geeked out by this. He would love this.
It's a lovely example of seeing how a different creative approach with similar shots gives a whole different meaning there. So if I just move on to our one of our next panelists. So Louis, could you introduce yourself and
Sure.
Tell us what you're about to show?
So hi everyone, I'm Louis Poutnoy. I'm the creative director and founder of Inspired Films. So similar to Jamie and Danny, we do all sorts. We do branding content, TV commercials, corporate documentaries. I did a feature documentary last year, actually, a theatrical feature documentary. We do lots of stuff with charities and education. And the reason I mention that is that, and the reason I've chosen the particular film in question is that, you know, it's now is the time to think differently, we feel, and you know, people are getting bored of the traditional talking heads interviews and those kind of conventional storytelling, and now is a real time to kind of make a difference and do something a little bit different and push the boundaries a little bit. You know, I guess we all feel the same, but you know, we really, you know, consider ourselves first and foremost as storytellers, and so really the challenge is always to how can we tell a story but not in the normal way. And so what we did with this film that's coming up is that it was all voiceover, but it was unscripted voiceover, and it was unscripted interviews as a voiceover narrative. But the way that we did it is we took the viewer on a journey throughout the film, from a physical journey, from age all the way through. It's a school film, so it goes all the way out from 4 to 18, but also a metaphorical journey. So that's how we've chosen this one. Hopefully it's a good example of maybe trying to do things a little bit differently.
When I graduate at Dunstan's, I can't wait to do all the activities. We've got a lot of space to play and learn. Sometimes I just be curious on my own. Our teachers encourage us to be more independent. If you don't understand something, your classmates will try and help you.
If you have any problems, then you can just talk to them.
Some of us are Nigerian, Jamaican, Swedish, English. It's amazing. Because you bond with your friends from other cultures.
It gives you a better understanding of the world. Teachers really try and encourage students to enjoy their subjects,
and they are there to support you and help you grow. It's very much, don't be afraid of failure, be afraid of a lack of confidence or not giving it a go.
It's good to have the mindset that you just have to do it a different way.
What can you offer? What are you good at? What are your strengths?
Welcome to St Dunstan's.
Welcome to our school.
Thanks so much for that, Louis. Now, our final panelist, Emily. I don't think that we have your video, do we? But perhaps we could do your introduction anyway.
Sure. Yeah, I've just sent a few various options over, but I think
which will all be available later, won't they? So exactly. Yeah.
So, hi, I'm Emily. I head up the film and animation team at Radley Eldar. So we're an integrated comms business. So we do everything from kind of employee experience through to brand communications, investor communications, and pretty much everything in between. I suppose from a storytelling perspective and from a filmmaking perspective, we always try and make sure that we're coming up with a creative execution that does the story justice and lets the story speak for itself. So the example that we've chosen to share was a film we made to do for Recycle Week in 2019, where we tried to tap into the positive activism that was happening around the kind of climate emergency at that point. And so we written a kind of spoken word poem that was delivered in quite an impassioned way by the presenter to kind of as a bit of a rallying cry. Hopefully it'll be able to be shared after the session.
Okay. I'm sure it will be, and we do, I'm told, have Danny's film, so we could go back to that one, Danny, if you just want to give us a brief introduction there.
Yes, so it's about a place called the Men's Shed Association, which is basically a community shed where people over the age of 50 can just go and make stuff. And it's just a little story about a group of people coming together and finding their tribe and just battling isolation, essentially.
And Danny, I think this is a moderately long film, and we're just going to show the first minute or so.
Yeah, teaser.
Yeah. Okay.
It's got to be about 5 years now. I went over to a place called Sun Something Centre over in Bethnal Green, and a lady asked me if I'd be interested in helping with a project, and I said, yeah, I'll certainly contemplate it.
The way I take it is a little society that is evolved around woodwork, not just woodwork, really. You know, if you want to come and socialise, you want biscuits, coffee, chat. You want to make something, like I do, you just crack on with it.
I feel a bit more relaxed with myself when I come to the men's sheds, making tables, chairs, whatever.
It's allowed me to start a hobby that's been latent in me for a number of years.
It takes an effort sometimes, but once I'm here, I don't forget about it.
That's just wonderful, and I'm actually just told that Emily's yours is now available. So perhaps we can take a look at that quickly as well.
2019. It's been exciting. A year of change, of action, people power rising. A year to stand up for what you believe in and make a difference. The year. We're taking things into our own hands. The year we're making a stand. The year we will empty, crush, squash in our homes, in our organisations, together. For the 79% of plastic waste ever created that's in the environment still, for future generations, so that there will be animals in nature and fish in the sea, so that you can look back on 2019 and say, yes, it was me that joined the revolution, rolled my sleeves up and said, I'm going to do something about this, instead of sitting in bed watching sad videos of turtles with plastic around their necks. Your likes won't save their lives. It's in your hands now where the power lies. To tackle a problem that is growing in size. To do something about this real problem that even school kids are shouting about. More people are recycling now than ever before. Join them. Spread the word that recycling is not a chore. It's a simple yet revolutionary act that can change the world. Recycle Week 2019. We're taking it into our own hands. Are you?
Well, thank you so very much for sharing all of those, and technically we got there in the end. I mean, I suppose that kind of leads us into a first point of why do we tell stories? What's kind of important as, you know, something which, you know, we're all in this business in order to you know, to work with clients and sell their messages, perhaps sell their products. So why tell stories, and why kind of use film to tell them? What are your thoughts there, Danny?
I mean, if the reason, you know, us as human beings started telling stories in the very first place was to establish how to live within a society, how to act, you know, how to be moral. And that sort of storytelling then moved on to, you know, things like text and stuff, so that could go to a wider audience. And now I think the idea of film has allowed us to, and, you know, the power of the internet has allowed that sort of idea of communicating values to spread globally. And I think that's what we're doing now more than ever. And I think what's going to happen after all this lockdown is, once again, it's going to be storytellers positioned to re-educate and show the world how we're meant to be interacting with each other. I mean, I don't know about you guys, but I'm cringe every time now I watch telly and I see people touch each other. And I think sort of figuring that out and having that in our films, obviously there's other messages, but at the very base of it is, I think, really, we tell stories to teach each other how to get on.
Jamie, is that a kind of feeling that you share too there? That's you know, that we're obviously telling stories to, you know, to engage and connect.
Definitely engage and connect. I suppose I've been doing this quite a while, and there's an element of cynicism that I will bring to everything, which is ultimately
You've been long in America, Jamie.
Yeah, that's what it is, and everything that I produce. I mean, right back to, you know, starting out when I started making films, it was about an objective for me. Like, what did I want to happen? Whether that be changing a behavior or influencing a behavior, or ultimately making somebody buy something. I maybe the American stuff has influenced me in that. But yeah, I think engagement for me is absolutely paramount, and also understanding an audience and knowing who that audience is that you're trying to engage first and foremost, and generating something that they will like and they will find the story in. I mean, I'm absolutely 100% for storytelling, and those two examples that I showed, I am leaning towards the storytelling angle massively, but it still needs to make you want that product. I still want people to go, oh, Toledo Spirits, I've never tried their whiskey. Even as a Scotsman, it's not bad. And that's kind of what I'm looking for. And I think film is a brilliant way of doing it. And right now, the appetite for it, I don't think it could ever be higher. So we're maybe in the right place.
Louis, one of the things that you did before you introduced your film is kind of, you know, talk about talking heads. Actually, I mean, a very, very big part of, you know, our industry's output is talking heads. Let's face it. So, you know, you were almost kind of touching on there a desire to kind of do more than that.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, the way that we look at it is that whether it's a 10-second commercial or a 2-hour feature film, it's a story. Story's a story, and the story has to be there, because people buy people. And, you know, gone are the days, we're not in the 50s and the 60s where, you know, it's a defined, you've got a program and then you've got the adverts, and people would watch the adverts because, let's be honest, they couldn't not watch the adverts because it's in between the programs. We're in a much more sophisticated environment now where people don't want to be sold to overtly in terms of products, and actually they can, you know, with video on demand, they can actually screen out the ads. So they've had to find a way to bring advertising within the stories. And actually, back to what I said, people by people, actually it's the interest, it's the human interest. Those, for us, they're the ones that are most powerful. They're the ones that are the most engaging. And the byproduct of that will be the link with the product that's being sold. And I think ultimately, if the story isn't good, no matter how long it is, and if it isn't well crafted, and if it isn't engaging, you will fail in what you do. And so it's very, very important to not be lazy, to make the story at the heart of what you're doing when you're telling that story. And because you have, whether it's, you know, a few seconds or a few minutes or whatever, to engage with that audience, and you have to connect with them. So I think for that, it's important.
Yeah, I mean, Emily, I think kind of everybody here is, emphasizing the word engagement there, and and also that we are, of course, saturated with with video content in kind of all sorts of ways. So I think that what a general kind of theme is here is that one of the ways that we can kind of get cut through is in order to tell engaging stories. Is that a kind of theme that you'd connect with?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I think that the power of film, particularly in telling stories, is to take people on an emotional journey through that story. And I think, one of the things that's really important in terms of crafting your story is to think about the emotion that you want your audience to feel at the end of it. So, it's not about necessarily building in, like, make them laugh out loud or make them sob or whatever. It could be a much more subtle emotion. It could be confidence or inspiration or action or anger. And so I think one of the things that we look to do to try and connect and craft that as part of crafting the film. I think film is the most powerful way of connecting emotionally with your audience.
I mean, I just wanted maybe to touch on, when a brief kind of arrives on any of our desks, does it necessarily have kind of narrative-based story written into it, or is this more likely something that we're kind of creatively suggesting? And I just kind of wondered there that how, therefore, do we perhaps persuade a client to go down a route which, by its very nature, is often a little more expensive, or perhaps vastly more expensive. So how do we kind of get client engagement? If you see what I'm saying, do you have any thoughts on that, Jamie?
I think the example that I showed you guys is a tool that I use very often to literally hand them the two versions and say, you can go with a voiceover driven corporate voice. I say it a lot of the time in the US, and I'm sure you guys see it from everywhere, that it's a corporate voice. And I try to say to companies big and small, it's probably going to be better if you tell your story, or you let your customers tell your story, or you let us find the story in what it is you're doing. And an example is really, really good. I'm sure you guys are all the same. It's really good to point people to it. And actually, it's great for me to see, what you guys are doing, because I'm going to use them as examples if they're still out there, to show people good narrative, because it's sometimes missed if you're dealing directly with either a corporate person in the nicest possible way, or even a marketing person. Sometimes they miss that element of storytelling in film, so it's good to show examples of it.
I think also kind of in the US, there maybe is a little bit more of a tendency to want to kind of shout about yourself, as opposed to necessarily allow it to be kind of said in a more kind of engaging way by perhaps somebody else.
Yeah,
I think we're a little more, able to realize that the other one has kind of more ability. Yeah.
Absolutely. It's very interesting, the differences between the two markets. The US, on the whole, value marketing, like actual sales marketing, way higher than any UK business in repeated research and surveys. It comes out in the top 3 in the US every single time. And here, it's like, you're in Scotland, it's actually probably barely in the top 20. There's such cynicism up here. So, but there's that kind of softer edge is harder to get over in the US, whereas I think we're probably a little bit more open to a storytelling approach as opposed to sell. I think they want to just get straight to it in the US a lot of the time.
I think that's changing though, I have to say. I mean, I've some of our clients in the US, and actually we've got some I've got some friends who've got production companies based in the West Coast and in Texas, and actually I've seen over the past sort of 4 or 5 years a real seismic shift away from overt selling to more kind of story based, and I think that's reflective of how people are consuming content. Looking at content on Netflix and the other streamers, it's about how can we consume the kind of content that they're watching, but it's to short form instead of longer form. So I think they've been forced to, because there's going to be a point where they're going to realize that adverts, great, switch, turn over. So I think they're being kind of forced kicking and screaming to sort of think slightly differently now.
So there maybe are some trends there that with, you know, certain clients are kind of realizing, you know, a kind of barometer of what is good and, you know, and what's kind of effective that way. But Danny, I mean, how do you kind of maybe engage a client from, you know, from the get-go to kind of go down something which perhaps could be kind of quite a risky way of, you know, achieving a brief?
Yeah, but I think what Louis said before about people buying people is a really good point. And I think if when you go in and have those conversations, you can tell a story yourself to, you know, who you're trying to sell that film to, and you engage them and you get them, you know, excited and you get them invested in the characters or the people. I think once you've done that, I think that's half the battle won for you, because every time you have those conversations again, it's always like, oh, you know, the one thing that really stuck in my mind is that little personality quirk or that little moment, or this bit broke my heart when you said that, and we knew we had to go down that route. So yeah, I think it's from the very beginning, having those conversations and trying to be that storyteller straight away.
Emily, I mean, is that something therefore that when you've got a client who's kind of, you know, maybe thinking of something which is more a kind of, you know, a story that that you're trying to kind of create there, are you kind of showing the client kind of, say, examples of kind of great storytelling in order to get them on board?
Yeah, I think that's exactly it. I think, you know, the biggest tool that we have is showing great storytelling examples to our clients to get them on board with what we're trying to do. And I think, you know, the trick for us is to try and challenge ourselves to pull those examples from sometimes unexpected places to help us explain to the client what we're doing, because I think there's often an element of where people think, oh, well, this is a corporate message or this is a marketing message, therefore we need to target this specific person. And actually, you know, remembering that that specific person is the same person that watches Netflix or goes to the cinema or cries over Blue Planet or whatever that is, that actually drawing our examples of brilliant stories don't have to be from another organisation that's doing the same thing or trying to communicate the same message. It's about, what is this story that we want to tell, and what's the very best examples that we can put forward to say, these are the techniques that are going to get this across and make it land. And,
you know, I suppose kind of so often our industry's kind of been seen as a B2B industry, and I don't know if I kind of speak for us all, but are we kind of talking the language a little bit more that it's kind of like people to people as opposed to, you know, this...
100%.
So kind of, you know, and we're just kind of clearly saying, look, you know, this is obviously what people are kind of watching on Netflix or whatever you you know, you might see that way. We are actually just hitting the half hour here, so if anybody does have any questions, we can certainly take those in the chat there. But I thought when we were chatting yesterday, and obviously, you know, we've not just had an extremely odd time and are far from kind of over this, but, you know, the one thing that I think that we can be fairly certain of is that money is going to be tight going forward. And, but, you know, of course, certain clients have done well during this period, and certain clients are obviously on their knees. So, I mean, do you feel that there would be more of a desire to kind of go down a route of kind of engage in storytelling this way, or do we see it as being something where clients might not have that propensity to want to kind of, you know, do something different or take risk? How do we feel a future being there?
I mean, I think that, as you kind of said, it's a very different time. It's a very sort of challenging, I guess, and this new normal that we're about to head into, which we talked to them about yesterday, it's an unknown. No one really knows what's going to happen. You know, every day there's a different story. Is it a recession? Is it not a recession? Is there going to be a huge bounce? I think the way we look at it is that at the end of the day, companies are going to need to market to audiences. There is still a huge global audience, and they still need to sell products. I don't know if they're going to be looking at whether they want to be telling stories. I think they're going to be interested in how can we get the money in. And I think it's our job as filmmakers, which it should be anyway, to guide and advise them on the best way of doing that, which comes down to, you know, the right type of film for the right type of client or product. So I think that ultimately, I mean, I would always err on the side of telling good stories. But I think really for us, it's speaking with the clients, understanding, as Emily mentioned, you know, it's understanding the client, understanding the audience, and understanding how can you connect, because again, it's down to connection, because, you know, it is difficult at the moment and there is going to be a shortage of cash, and so they need to make their money go further. And so any way you can do that, I think that brands, the clever brands and the clever marketers will be open to, because they'll just be saying, okay, how do we do this? Come to us and say, right, what do you think? The ones that we've spoken to that are doing it the right way are saying, okay, how do we do this? How can we make content going forward that's going to really make an impact?
And Louis, is your kind of experience there? I mean, is most of the, you know, your work, is there another agency involved, or is the creative kind of largely, you know, coming from yourselves? How does? I mean, it
depends. We have a mix. We sometimes work with agencies where we are we are quite creative. We work directly with brands. We work directly with organisations. It's a real mixed bag. Typically, we're involved with the client, whoever the client is, from a creative level from the beginning. And actually, sometimes we're involved even before the brief's gone out. We actually sometimes work with some of our clients at pitch stage. So we're trying to look at what we can do with them going forward. And then sometimes, you know, as I'm sure Danny and Jamie and Emily, you know, attest to, sometimes you'll get a client will come to you and say, right, this is the film. Here's a signed off storyboard. Here's a script. Go shoot it next week. Which, you know, we've done before. So really, yeah, I mean, we prefer the creative input, because we like to feel that, you know, we'd like to think we know what we're doing, and so we can give advice on what works, and more importantly, what doesn't work. And I think that's the key. Sometimes a client may say, "Oh, we want to do this," and we can say, "Well, look, we've tried that before, and it just hasn't worked. On paper, it does. In practice, it doesn't."
Danny, what do you feel? Is this something where we enter a future where, you know, clients are largely wanting to de-risk, or perhaps, you know, much to kind of Jamie's experience in the US, is actually kind of put, you know, real value behind marketing?
The part of me really fears that's what's going to happen, or because I think it's a scary time, and I think in scary times people panic, and when people panic, they go for what's safe. But yeah, I think it's our job to give people solutions and give them interest in things. I think, you know, we have to go back to that energy and creativity we had as 18-year-olds, where we just think, you know what, there's this one thing, it's going to be crazy, we can make it happen, and let's just go out and do it. I'm inspired by Del Toro's Shape of Water. He didn't have a huge amount of money for that film, and he was a bit bummed out, and his DOP went to him and said, look, you know, if we had this amount of money, which they did have 20 years ago, what would have we done? We would have went out and we would have made the film, and we would have cut corners where we could, and we would have just, you know, put everything into it. And that's what they did, and they made an amazing film out of it. And I think that's, you know, what we have to do.
Yeah, let's hope we all get even close to that budget. But yeah. Emily, what do you are you feeling optimistic? How do you feel storytelling is in the future?
I probably, if you ask me that question on a Monday, I'd give you a different response to a Friday at the moment. It's you know, it's in fact, my husband's bought himself a crystal ball to try and help him answer these sorts of questions. But I mean, I like to think, I am a bit of an eternal optimist, and I like to think that actually storytelling and sharing stories and sharing good stories is actually one of the ways that we all come out of this and grow as clients, as businesses, as creatives. And you know, I think to Danny's point, actually telling brilliant stories doesn't have to be expensive. Like, it can be, but it doesn't always have to be. And sometimes the best ideas are the ones that are actually really simple, and the execution of that idea might not and actually right now probably can't involve getting on a plane and going to all four corners of the earth and, you know, taking loads of kit and crew with you. So we're going to have to think really creatively about how we tell these stories, especially if they're important stories to tell. So I like to think that in the end, you know, the power of brilliant stories is going to help us come out of the other side of this. And if we can continue to champion them, then, you know, we've got things to be optimistic about.
So, I mean, just kind of on that point, Jamie, because, you know, travel either way on is going to be difficult going forward. So, I mean, what creatively do we have at our disposal here? I mean, is this, do you feel that clients are going to be pushing us to go down a route of stock and, you know, all of that world, or what do you feel is going to happen?
It's already happening right now. I mean, we're down the route of stock. We're down the route of self-shot. We're down the route, doing it all this week for TV commercials right now. We're recording, you know, stuff like this to try and fit in. And I'm up for it. I think anything creative is a tool at our disposal. But going back to the kind of what's going to happen in the future, am I optimistic about it? I am. I think there's always going to be a need for good storytelling. There's always going to be a value put on it. But when the pressure is on from a cost perspective, what I think happens is there becomes a separation in the minds of our clients and the purchasers, not all of them, but some of them, of what they're buying. So there are people who see what we do as buying a video, a technical process, as I think, you know, Louis talked about. People that come along and say, this is what I want you to go and do, go and point the cameras.
Yeah.
And so there's a difference in that value proposition for people who understand what buying creative is and buying that creative storytelling and that expertise. So I think that's going to be the fine line that we're all going to have to tread is, you know, how far can we take a client on that creative journey before they're going to go, look, just point the camera and get them to say that thing. So, you know, I'm not trying to be the skeptic or the, you know, the doom gloom, but I think there is that happening. And I think I experienced it during the last recession as well. So we'll wait and see quite how far and deep everybody's scarred. But, you know, we can still be creative.
There's another kind of enormous thing that's kind of happened during this period as well, you know, of our attitude to race. And obviously I'm kind of, you know, looking around this virtual room, and I see, you know, I see all white faces. I mean, how do we, I mean, you know, most of our industry at this moment in time is, you know, is predominantly male, predominantly white, and Emily, forgive me, but I'm sure you'd agree with me on that one. And, you know, I mean, how do we feel that kind of point of engagement going forward is going to work? What are we going to, you know, do differently in order for, you know, for messages and engagement to work? Anybody want to pick up on that one? We weren't briefed on that before, were we?
I'm quite happy. My approach has been to keep listening. I got to be honest. I think it's what I've taken from a lot of this is to listen and to look for opportunities to listen and learn and to be aware, you know, and to look at the situation you've just described and say, you know, we've got to take some responsibility and listen and try and be part of that change.
I mean, from our perspective, I mean, looking at this, it has been you know, a very, very interesting time, and to see what's unraveling. I think that the protest is reflective of a changing mood, and following on from what Jamie said, I think our job is to listen. You know, it is to, you know, to reflect and to actually make content that is reflective of the current mood. And we've always looked, you know, as storytellers, we always look for the most interesting stories, the most diverse stories, because it reflects real life. And I think whatever we're doing has to reflect real life, because again, it comes back to connecting with the audience. If we're telling a story that isn't really reflective of what people are thinking or doing, then it will fail. So I think we as filmmakers have to listen to the noise and act upon the noise. And sometimes we can direct the noise if we want to, and that's when, you know, sometimes you're in a privileged position to make something that makes a difference. And that's obviously, I guess that's always the goal, isn't it? You know, as filmmakers, you want to make a film, make a piece of content that is that, you know, that standard hall bearer, flag bearer, and go, yes, we're gonna look at that and look, we've made a difference. But actually, most of the time, it's reflecting what people are wanting or thinking. And I think it's the same thing here with Black Lives Matter. I think you know, I think we need more diverse stories, because diverse stories make the most interesting stories anyway.
Yeah, and I think that the big challenge for us as an industry is to include those voices and that thought process in our industry and in our thinking, because, you know, it's very, you know, difficult when you're a team of creatives that are all coming at things from one angle to actually make sure you are being inclusive across the board. So, you know, we've got a long way to go on this, and you know, it's not going to be fixed overnight. But I think that the responsibility lies with all of us to try and make sure that we're creating opportunities and the room for growth within our industry for people from all sorts of backgrounds, not just ones who can afford to spend 6 months not earning any money to break into the industry. I think that's, you know, something that's incumbent on us all.
Yeah. I mean, one of the themes that's just kind of come up in the chat there is, you know, is a very kind of interesting point of how perhaps brands are maybe prioritizing, targeting a younger generation as well here. I mean, perhaps for a kind of, you know, a number of obvious and, you know, perhaps not so obvious reasons. Once again, how do we deal with that as a you know, as an industry? What do we how do we kind of alter? Because I suppose historically our audience has been, you know, probably for the most part kind of, you know, 30 plus, probably, you know, fairly established, you know, that kind of market. So perhaps what might we be doing differently? Danny, would you like to talk that?
So in terms of how do we change to target those younger audiences? What techniques? Yeah. I mean, I think again,
Danny, you're probably the person in the room who's a little closer to that age.
I just look in the mirror and I'm like, what would you like?
Well, I'm in my early 20s.
I'm so sorry, Jamie. I'm only saying it. You're a long way away, mate. So that's the only reason I'm saying.
I'm very fortunate because I've got a 13-year-old sister. So I sort of just see what she's up to and what technology she's used and what she thinks is cool, which is normally way off from what I think young people would like. But yeah, I think it's listening, and I think it's, you know, being open to experimenting and trying stuff that you haven't done before, and, you know, and looking out for those new content that's being made that, you know, might not be polished and finished, and seeing, oh, okay, this is trends that's happening now. This is interesting. How can I sort of pinch bits of this, because this is obviously something that target audience is liking at the moment, and then it's, you know, trying to, without being, you know, a magpie that just takes everything that's shiny and trying to use it as your own, but then fitting that within your own voice and your own style and seeing if there's a way of matching those up, I guess.
So, I mean, thank you so much for that. I mean, we actually come to the end of our allotted time. I mean, I suppose I'm just kind of summing up there that in some ways we're not necessarily seeing huge differences. What we're still kind of talking about here is that we've got to, you know, be of course, you know, steering a client to, you know, to be making good decisions. That obviously storytelling is something which is eminently engaging, and you know, people are obviously wanting to invest in content that works. So you know, and I think the other kind of big theme there is that what we've all got to do as creatives here is listen and learn from it. So thank you, and I certainly have in this session. So
in fact, another question.
Claire, you're like Mr. Ben comes back in at the end and wraps everything up there.
And another question just came in saying, you know, does anyone think TikTok has a place in business comms going forward?
I totally knew this was coming. I've been thinking about TikTok every time you've been speaking about it. It's terrifying, but yes.
Yeah, but it's reflective of what's happening now, and it's just an evolution, because you know it's just it's like YouTube.
Yeah, and in 2 years' time it'll be something else. So
Yeah,
it's just
exactly.
the speed of change is ever increasing, and I think it's that intensity of trying to keep up, which is really hard, which is why we constantly need to replenish any business with young people, so that they remain connected to all of those motivations, the technology, the ways of thinking, to move it all forward, or else you end up with a room of middle-aged people like me who don't quite know what's going on. Anyway, thanks ever so much. Thank you to all of you. Thank you, Andrew, for facilitating so wonderfully. Thank you, Danny, Jamie, Louis, and Emily. You've been a lovely panel to have. And we thank you for your time and your input. As we mentioned at the beginning, very sorry about the technical difficulties, you know, best will in the world. We had rehearsed all that, but no, didn't work. All of those films will be available on our website tomorrow. So you can always go back and have another look, and have a look at, you know, the longer versions of some of them if you want to sort of see them in their full glory. We hope to see you back here next week for the next webinar sessions, and the week after that will be our Clarion's award ceremony. So I'll do a little shout out for that, for people to please have a look and buy tickets. They're very reasonably priced, and we hope to see you there. And there'll be one more at the end of the month, and we hope as many of you can join us then. But thank you very much, and good afternoon. See you later. Bye.